Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to Mind Hostage, a show where real people discuss real issues of overcoming negativity and a negative mindset. I'm your host, Stephen Payne, and I'm glad to be here with you today. Today's episode is brought to you by CBD 911, distributors of some of the purest CBD on the planet. With a 60-day empty bottle money-back guarantee, their CBD is certified organic, non-GMO. You can visit them at www.mycbd911.com. Today we're going to talk to Nanette Pace about something that changed her life dramatically on Friday, October the 15th of 2004. Nanette, thanks for coming on the show today. How are you?
I'm good, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Good. Nanette, so you've agreed to come on and talk a little bit about some adversity that you've been through. Now, I know you've been through much more than we're going to discuss today with regard to your past and your childhood. But today, I want to talk a little bit about that Friday in October of 2004. And if you wouldn't share with our listeners a little bit about what changed your life on that day.
Yes, it's been, 13, 14 years now since that day. And it seems like yesterday when I just recall it. About 6:30 in the morning, my phone rang. And it woke me up because I had just gotten off of a shift the night before. I was working as a paramedic at Scott & White in Temple. And I worked a double because we were short-staffed. So tired, I went to bed 11, 12 o'clock that Thursday night and hadn't seen my kids because they were already in bed sleeping. And my son would get up about 5:45, 6 o'clock and go work before school. He was a senior in high school. And so he left the house about probably 10 to 6 o'clock that morning. So I never saw him leave. He would go to work before school. Well, about 6:45, when the phone rang and woke me up, I got that call that every parent dreads. And it was the trauma coordinator from the emergency room telling me that my son had been involved in a very bad car accident.
Oh my goodness, that's a phone call every parent dreads.
Yeah. His next words were the ones that hit the hardest. Being a paramedic and knowing, the medical side of things, he said, "You need to get here quickly because it doesn't look good."
Oh my gosh! So you got this news out of the blue that things weren't good and you needed to come to the hospital pretty quickly. What was going through your head at that point?
I was pretty numb, actually. This call woke me up. So on top of not even being able to absorb what was being said to me, I was still half asleep. So I just sat there for a second and I didn't really even respond. And I don't even know, honestly, that I did respond. The next thing I remember is I was in my car driving to the emergency room. Terry, the gentleman who called me from the trauma services, my EMS director and bosses were there. The supervisors were there. A couple of my coworkers were there, and they didn't let me in. They stopped me at the door and said, "You need to stop right here. We need to tell you what you're about to walk into." Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Wow. So I none of it was good news?
No good news. Well, actually, I guess the good news is they had him on a ventilator, so he was breathing and he wasn't dead at that point. So, I guess you could grasp that as good news.
So there's still hope.
There was hope.
Yeah. Hope.
At that point, yeah.
Yeah.
I really didn't know what I was walking into, except that it was bad. And when all of your EMS family is surrounding you saying you have to stop right here and collect yourself and prepare yourself for what you're about to see.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what happened in the next hours?
Well, they told me all of his injuries before we went back. He was in trauma room 1. For anybody who's never walked into a trauma room when a trauma is going on, it's the sight and the smells and the sounds, it's overwhelming.
So they took you into the room with your son?
Mm-hmm. There was blood on the floor. His clothes were on the floor. There was medical equipment all over the floor. It's a very different room that you walk into as a mom than you do as a medical professional.
Oh, sure. I don't imagine that any of the training you'd received up until that point prepared you to stare at your son laying there.
No.
So before we get too far ahead, so could you explain the accident? What happened?
Yes. He was driving on a country road that was very curvy, very windy, to get out to where he was working for a friend of ours. And he was 17 years old, traveling at a high rate of speed, like most 17-year-old boys. And he lost control of his car, and he hit a tree in a curve. It had been raining off and on through the night, so the ground was still a little bit wet. And he lost control, and he was driving a very small Ford, 4-door compact car. And when he hit the tree on the driver's side, mostly front driver's side, it basically just collapsed the whole side of the front left side of the car.
Oh my goodness.
So he was trapped in the car.
So they had to actually cut him out of the car.
They had to cut him out of the car. They landed the helicopter there in the field. And they actually flew him into the hospital.
Wow. So when you walked into the ER and you saw him there, I mean, what'd you see?
I saw a lifeless child. He wasn't moving. Actually, he was posturing. For those people who aren't in the medical field, that's not a good sign. And I right away went to his side and grabbed his hand, and he squeezed my hand. I do remember that to this day. He squeezed my hand, and I took that as a good sign. Later finding out that was part of the posturing, that he was actually just pushing. But I held on to that.
Right.
You know.
Right. So to you guys that out there that don't know, about posturing, that is an indication of pressure on the brain typically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
he had head injuries.
He had head injuries. Basically, the whole left side of his body was fractured. Femur fractures, tibia fractures. So his whole leg on the left side, his arm on the whole left side. He had an open head injury and a closed head injury. The door frame, the driver's door frame basically came in on him and collapsed. I mean, it was just crushed on him. So
wow.
A lot of injuries. A lot. His neurologist was there, the trauma surgeon was there, of course, all the medical staff, and the neurologist looked at me. He was at the head of the bed, and he was actually doing some examinations for Chris's brain function. And he just looked up at me and said, "It's not good. I'm going to be very direct with you." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Where do we go from here?" And he said, "Well, he's 17. So we're going to take him to the OR. We're going to fix what we can fix. And we're going to wait and see if his brain heals."
So they took him up to the OR there, and what did they do in the OR?
They fixed his leg. They fixed all the fractures in his leg. They fixed the fractures in his left arm. He had a couple of broken ribs, which you can't do much for that. But everything, all the fractures that they could fix, they did. He had a ruptured spleen, and a laceration to his liver. So they fixed a bunch of just the internal injuries that they could,
mm-hmm.
and the broken bones that they could.
I don't suspect they could do anything at that point for his brain injury.
With the type of head injury that he had, being both open and closed, sometimes with like a closed head injury, they'll do what they call a craniotomy to give a little bit of room for the brain to swell. Chris basically already had that in his injuries.
Okay.
So there wasn't a whole lot more they could do beyond that. He kind of already had that. So it was a waiting game.
So it sounds like he went from there to the ICU.
He went from from the ER to the OR to the ICU.
Wow. But so how long was he in the ICU total?
This happened Friday morning, and he was in the ICU until late Sunday night.
So talk about a long waiting game then. So what was going through your mind at that point? I mean, I understand quite a bit about the stages of grief. I mean, obviously he was still alive, so you had to have some hope to hold on to.
A lot of hope.
What was going on with you at that point, and where were you at mentally at that point?
I think mentally I was still in disbelief. I remember saying to myself, this is not happening. This is a bad dream. Somebody wake me up. This is not real. Just a lot of denial, a lot of please bargaining. Somebody make it stop. Tell me this is not happening. He's just going to wake up. He's going to wake up and talk to us, and everything's going to be okay.
So who you're bargaining with?
I didn't know anybody that would listen, really.
Mm-hmm.
Myself, God. He's a child. I mean, he'd been baptized. We've been religious. I was raised Lutheran my whole life, confirmed, baptized. And you just bargain with anybody that'll listen.
Mm-hmm.
Plead,
Yeah, so that holding on to hope, pleading, going through the disbelief, are definitely initial stages of grief, yet how can you truly grieve if they haven't come to a final outcome yet? So what happened in those following hours on that Sunday?
Well, let me back you up just a little bit to Friday, because he started having a lot of problems with his blood pressure.
Uh-huh.
And this was after he came from the OR into the ICU. Christopher's father and I were divorced at the time. We had divorced years before that. And so we were trying to get him there from out of state. And Christopher's blood pressure kept falling. They kept just adding more blood pressure medicine to keep his blood pressure up. And we went into Friday evening, and I remember I had stepped out of the ICU for just a few minutes to try to catch just a little bit of composure and breathe a little bit. And Chris's dad had arrived. And as we were walking back to the room and he got to Christopher's bedside, Christopher's blood pressure completely went down. And they did a couple rounds of CPR on him and started another blood pressure medicine and quote unquote got him back.
Right.
I really in my heart believe that that's when his brain function ceased, when it stopped. I think that was really when Christopher died.
And everything from that point on was essentially artificial.
Yeah.
Through medications and breathing machines.
Because then we just kind of went through a roller coaster for 2 days, for all of Saturday and all of Sunday of his blood pressure was up, his blood pressure was down, they couldn't control his temperature. I mean, there was just so many things. As that medical professional, I knew what was happening. Mm-hmm. But as a mom, I was still holding on to hope.
Sure, talk about a roller coaster. Yeah, for sure.
Emotional roller coaster. I would say things like, okay, this is it. He's not going to get any better. I know his quality of life is never going to be what we'd want it to be, what he'd want it to be. So this is all futile. Why are we doing this? And then in the next couple minutes, I would be saying things like, nope, we're doing everything. We're not going to give up.
That's my baby.
Start another medicine.
Right.
So it's a crazy emotional roller coaster that you go through.
Mm-hmm.
And you almost wonder, I remember looking back and thinking, what if they had just called me that Friday and said, your son was killed in a car accident? Versus, your son was in a horrific accident and he's in the ER and you need to get here quickly because it doesn't look good. Right. And now you're in for 3 days of just emotions that to this day, I don't remember most of it.
to have hope, I think, and then to have those hopes dashed,
Mm-hmm.
probably has to be one of the worst forms of torture.
Yeah, and you go through so many feelings of, are we giving up too soon? Do we hold on another hour? Do you hold on another day? Do you give him a fighting chance? If we say, okay, stop everything, are we making the wrong decision?
So you're second guessing every decision you make.
Yeah.
Wow. It's a bad place to be.
A very hard place to be.
So you did this for 3 days. At the end of those 3 days, Nanette, tell me kind of what happened at that point.
Sunday came and his medical team pulled us back to the room, and they said that Christopher was going through what they call herniation. That's where the brain has the swelling has gotten to the point where there's nowhere else for it to go. The skull is hard and thick, and the brain can't go any further. So instead, it goes down the brainstem, and essentially, Chris's brain they had suspected that his brain had stopped functioning. So they advised that they take him to cerebral blood flow, which is a test they do to see if he was getting any blood flow to the brain.
Oh my goodness.
So that was Sunday morning, and mid-morning, late morning. We waited and waited and waited, and like anybody who's ever been in the hospital for anything, you just wait. You wait for them to take him to do the test, and then for the results. And so when we finally got the results back, it was later Sunday afternoon, and they again called us back into this family room and told us that what they suspected was true, and the test confirmed the fact that Chris's brain had stopped functioning.
Wow.
So he was at this point brain dead.
So here's your son laying brain dead, yet by all other intensive purposes he's still alive, and that machine's breathing for him. His heart's still beating.
He's warm to the touch.
He's warm. I can see my son hold on to him, touch him.
Since Friday, what brought me the most comfort was laying my head on his chest.
Yeah.
And just hearing his heartbeat. And I had done that for 2 days. And the sounds and the smells, and everything just soaks into you. And as the medical professional in me, I knew what they were telling me was right. I didn't doubt what they were telling me as a medical professional, but as a mom, I just couldn't believe it.
Can't be true.
It can't be true.
Yeah.
His heart's beating, he's warm. I can hold his hand, I can sit here with him, but he's dead. That is a very hard concept to wrap your heart around.
Sure, because, some of you that haven't been through this don't know, but at the point where they're telling you that your loved one's brain isn't functioning anymore, the very next step is a decision-making process.
What do you do now?
And you're kind of on a clock, if you will. Once they've determined that a patient is brain dead, then they have to take the next step. And so I guess that's what you guys were faced with.
Yeah, we were. And that's kind of where the whole experience of the weekend takes a turn. Because I remember sitting by his bed with my daughter, who was 15 at the time, and his dad. We were the only three in the room with him. And I was holding his hand. I laid my head on his chest. And I just said, God, help me know what to do next. Where do we go from here? And my daughter said, Mom, didn't Christopher register to be an organ donor? And I kind of just lifted my head and I thought, he did. So now we're scrambling for Chris's wallet, and everything was in a bag, because they give you all their stuff from, when they came in. So we're looking for his wallet, and at the same time, I recalled a conversation that I had had with him when he got his driver's license. He came home so excited that he had registered on his driver's license to be an organ donor. And at the time, I remember thinking, Christopher, we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, who wants to think about that?
I think it's a great thing that you've done. Very, admirable that you would think about other people if something happened to you. But okay, whatever. I was not I had not thought about organ donation. I didn't know anything about it.
Right at his age, yeah. Who even thinks
17,
about that? How conscientious?
16, But it's good that they offer that to kids and when they're doing their driver's license. But so that's where we were at this point. We're thinking, okay, this is something that Christopher really thought about, right. And he talked about. Of course, that was the farthest thing from my mind during all of this that's going on. And so when the nurse came in, I said, we are all sitting here talking, and Christopher had signed up to be an organ donor when he got his license. So what do we do with that? And she looked at me and said, hold on, let me get the people that you need to talk to.
So at this point, with this revelation, I don't know, but if I wouldn't think to myself that this is an opportunity to continue my son's legacy, was that crossing your mind at that point?
Not yet.
No,
not yet.
Because he was still.
It was, yeah. So you're still. I'm still kind of. We're still within hours of finding out that he's brain dead. But you almost here again. I found myself grasping at, okay, now what do I do with this?
Right.
Where do we go from here? Is there something, we can make something good come out of this? We can maybe help somebody else. Can I help another mother not have to feel what I'm feeling right now? So a lot of different things I'm thinking, wow. A lot of different feelings. At the same time, I'm still struggling with, but my son was just taken from me.
In order to do that, you're going to have to let your son go.
Yeah, now you really got to let him go.
Yeah.
And I knew nothing about the process other than the fact that Chris wanted this. This could be his last gift to someone, or his legacy, like you mentioned. This could be his legacy. He was a senior in high school. He had already enlisted to go into the Air Force. He had told me multiple times, Mom, I want to help people like you do. You're a paramedic. You help people all the time. I want to be a firefighter. I want to go in the Air Force. He just wanted to give. He was a giving kid. And it all just kind of started fitting together. It's like, okay, we're gonna take this that we're going through that's such a tragedy right now, and maybe we can make it better and help somebody.
Well, so all while I'm sure being sick to your stomach with having to make these decisions for him.
Yeah. And the emotions are still just too much.
So when these folks came in, I guess with this organ donation department or company that came in and spoke to you about it, how'd that conversation go?
It was a little hard.
Yeah.
It was, because I'm still trying to digest the fact that he's really dead.
Right.
And doing this paperwork and this conversation is just solidifying that.
Right.
Because now we're talking about taking him to the operating room and taking out his organs and giving them to somebody.
Yeah.
So now you've got another visual happening in your mind as a mom. I know it's a good thing. So here I'm having this almost dual struggle again of, I know this is a good thing. I know this is what he wants, but this is still my child.
So at this point, when you're having to face this type of a decision, my guess would be that in order to make this decision, it means the finality, of your son, and the finality of the hope that there's any chance that your son could pull out of this.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that hits you pretty hard. Because that's what you're dealing with. That's
Right.
the emotion you're dealing with. The fact of, okay, yeah, he's really dead.
Because what I know about hope in these circumstances is that to come to that point where you have to make that decision means that, again, you have to second guess yourself that there may have been something else that you could do. If we would have waited just a little bit longer, that perhaps he could have pulled through.
Mm-hmm.
And did the decision you make lose that opportunity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a lot of that in the 3 days we were there. There was a lot of those kind of feelings.
For every decision you made.
For every decision, yeah. Did we wait? Did we not wait long enough? Did we wait too long? Did they start every medication they could have? You know? I mean, all the way back to even before he had his wreck. What if I just said he couldn't go do that job?
And not only question yourself, I'm certain you were probably questioning the doctors too, right?
Everything.
Yeah.
You question everything. I what if'd myself to death
Mm-hmm.
for a long time. But it started there. Those, what if I'd only, if I'd only.
Yeah.
Yeah. Guilt I had a lot of guilt as a mom.
So you were right there at that moment while your son's still struggling for his life, and I'm sure there was guilt of, even as a parent, could I have done more?
Mm-hmm.
Could I have been a better parent?
Mm-hmm. What's the last thing I said to him?
Right.
When's the last time we had a fight? When's the last time I told my son I loved him? You know?
Wow.
I didn't even get to see him that morning. So those are the things that are really just coming at you. It's like, have you ever driven in a blizzard?
Actually, yes.
Yeah, it's like it's just coming at you, and you're like, please make it stop. Because you're just all over the place. You're just a mess. I was a mess. If it weren't for my family and my friends, my EMS family, because I was a single mother at the time. Divorced, single mother, 2 kids, working as a paramedic, trying to make ends meet, working long hours as a paramedic.
Which is a tough job by itself.
By itself, just the emotion and, you know, the workload and the fatigue and, you know, if it weren't for those people just embracing me and supporting me and loving me and, you know, my family, I don't know that I could have gotten just through the 3 days.
Right.
Because we're just at the 3 days.
Mm-hmm. So those 3 days are over, and you're sitting here with the staff, you know, talking about donating your son's organs. So, I mean, obviously, a decision had to be made.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
The decision actually was the easy part.
Because you knew he wanted to.
Because I knew he wanted to. I knew this is what he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
This is Christopher's final act. And it kind of gives purpose to his being, you know? Knowing that someone else is going to be able to live a healthy life. My son's 17 years old. He is, you know, has no health issues. So he's healthy other than all the trauma that happened, you know, from the wreck. And I'm thinking, man, he can help so many people.
Mm-hmm. So you made the decision, and so what happened from that point forward?
We did the donation. We went forward with the donation. He was able to donate his liver and both of his kidneys. His heart went through a lot because, as I mentioned earlier, remember when I said his blood pressure was falling, all of those medications that they were giving him, they had him on 5 different blood pressure medications at one point.
Wow.
And that did a lot of damage to his heart. So we weren't able to donate his heart. But we were able to donate his valves. So it's called donation heart for valves. The valves of his heart. So, you know, that could help somebody that has to have open heart surgery or valve replacement. So we were able to do that. We donated his corneas. And everybody kind of gave me a hard time on that one. And my philosophy was, my son was, he loved to joke around. He loved to play pranks on people. He was just mean to his sister. He was just ornery, you know. But he had such a happy-go-lucky, positive outlook on life that I thought, if someone else can see the world through Chris's eyes, I want to donate his corneas.
Wow, what an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people were a little bit taken. I say people, my family.
Right.
They were like, why would you do that? And not knowing anything about donation at this point.
Right.
That's just the way I looked at it. I thought, if the person who's never been able to see before could see the world through Chris, the way Chris does, that I think it would just be amazing. So I donated his corneas. But he was able to help, 4 or 5 people through.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because, in the tragedy that you suffered and the pain that you were feeling, there's 4 or 5 other mothers on the other end, or people grieving and hoping for
A miracle.
a miracle.
Yeah.
And here was their miracle.
Mm-hmm. Chris was their miracle.
Yeah.
We didn't get our miracle. But there again, that's where I told you that the shift changed. The shift happened.
Mm-hmm.
It's, we had hope in Chris getting better, and now we know he's not going to. Now we know we've lost him. But can we help someone else not have to go through what we're going through right now?
Right.
And that's kind of right away where my brain went. And it seems so weird to me. And then you have the guilt again.
What kind of guilt were you feeling at that point then? I mean,
well, because now I'm thinking, am I insensitive to losing my son to the point where I want someone else to be better?
right.
Because now I'm thinking about these other people that he can help.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have part of my family saying, well, we lost Christopher. Nobody helped Christopher. They're in your
Right.
ear.
Mm-hmm.
And why are you doing this in your ear?
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't believe the opinions that people have
Unsolicited, I'm sure.
when you're going through something like
Yeah.
this. You're supposed to feel a certain way, and you're supposed to act a certain way, and you're supposed to believe a certain way. And for anybody who's ever been through such a tragic death and loss, especially of a child, I lost my mother when I was a little girl. I've lost multiple family members, but nothing compared to the loss of a child. And as a mom, you're dealing with all those emotions that everybody's trying to tell you should have anyway, but they don't get it or see it.
Well, so you made this decision. It sounds like you kind of turned the corner at that point where you lived with your decision. You knew you were going to help other people, but that couldn't have been the end of your grieving. It was probably just the beginning.
I think very much the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hard to explain. But then we're going into the funeral, and that again is bringing a whole different realm of emotions and grief, and this is closure, and now I have to be strong to get my daughter through this, and I have to make all these decisions, and the decisions are just enormous. It's like, what kind of flowers do you want, and what kind of music do you want to play, and do you want to have a visitation, and how many people are going to come?
Oh my goodness! Yeah, so you
it's
can't really begin grieving because you still have decisions.
You have so much to do.
Yeah.
I had people sleeping on my floor from family traveling in, and then it's almost like you go into this crazy hosting mode, where you have to make sure everybody has a place to sleep and everybody eats, and
Oh my goodness.
and you're planning a funeral. I'm planning a funeral for my 17-year-old son. And what do you wear?
Right.
And what it's just so many things,
One of the things that you see though is that eventually goes away. The people go away. They go back home. Everybody that's there to support you goes back to work, and then eventually, to me, about the first time you were alone in the house.
The silence.
Yeah.
Part of me welcomed it, but then part of me felt that's when you really feel the loss, because it was so empty.
Just keep waiting for him to walk in the door.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or just walking past his bedroom. It's 6:00 in the morning and he should be getting up and going to school. And he's not. And it was just me and my daughter now at this point, and I had a big house, big house, 2 living rooms. I couldn't close enough doors, and I'm not a closed door person. I don't even like to sleep with my bedroom door closed. It's always been, I guess, from my childhood. I want to be able to see, everything around me, and never even closed doors. And I found myself constantly closing doors to make, I don't know, I guess maybe to make my space smaller, to feel, I don't know, to not feel, I don't know. But it was very strange because I kept Chris's bedroom door closed for a long time.
Kind of hard to look in there, I'm sure. Yeah.
And of course, my daughter's bedroom's right across the hallway.
So how about your daughter? I mean, she had to be, obviously she just lost her brother.
They were close. And this was a huge loss for Amanda. She was 15.
Wow.
Her and I grieved in very different ways. That's the other thing is, you think everybody's grieving like you. I just assumed she was feeling the same things I was feeling. She was going through it the same way I was. And it couldn't be further from the truth.
Is that right?
Yeah. She struggled so hard, and I didn't see it.
Yeah, you were in the midst of your own grief.
Yeah. And I'm the kind of person that when I grieve, I want to talk about it. I want to share it. I want to work through it.
Right. Yeah.
She's not.
Well, probably like me, I lock mine away.
That's what she does. And that's what she did.
She began to self-isolate?
She isolated. She wouldn't talk to me. She would get so angry with me. And I felt like it was with me, but I know now it wasn't. But we fought bad in those next couple weeks because we were grieving very differently. And you're right, I couldn't see it.
Well, that's an interesting dynamic. So you guys were kind of at each other then.
Yeah.
Was there a little bit of blame there? Or, what do you think was the source of that?
I think my overwhelming urge to put her in a bubble this is my only child. She just went from being a sibling to an only child. I just went from having 2 children to 1. And I'm a single mom. And a single mom who I just told you worked a lot of hours to be able to take care of my kids. And now I'm like, I can't do that. I can't be away from my child. I have to protect her. I have to put her in a bubble. And remember, she's 15. So guess what's coming up? She wants to drive. She wants to be independent.
My goodness. Oh, no.
I don't want that to happen.
No.
So we were butting heads bad. I mean, she would scream at me because she was so angry that she would get so angry with me. She would scream at me, "Mom, I'm not my brother. You can't just lock me away so that nothing happens to me." She would get so mad at me.
Well, and because she grieved differently, she saw you in a different light, too.
Yes.
She didn't understand your grieving.
But at the same time, Steve, she's the one that got me through.
Wow.
Because I went to a very dark place after Christopher died as a mom.
So when you say she got you through, was it just the fact that you knew you had someone to depend on you, or, Wow. So moving forward from this, kind of take me through the grieving process as you continue to grow, or, you had to go back to work and life, doesn't stop.
Yeah. So, everybody else goes on with their life. And you're still stuck in it,
Right.
And people, like I said, people have so many opinions of how long do you grieve? Shouldn't you be better by now? Shouldn't you be able to function? Shouldn't you be able to get out of bed?
Well, they want you to fit inside their box.
Yeah,
Is that it?
because life goes on.
Yeah.
It does. And it's going to go on without you. And remember, I'm a single mom.
Right.
I don't have a whole lot of, savings happening because I'd been working, for everything, trying to make ends meet. So, yeah, I had to go back to work.
So you have to pull it together to go focus on work.
And now I'm a paramedic and I have to go pull it together to take care of other people's kids.
So as going back to work as a paramedic, I'm certain you had to work car accidents. Was there triggers for you
Yeah,
moving past that?
there really were.
Yeah.
I had just gone through my training to be a critical care paramedic with Scott and White, and something I was very proud of because that was my goal. Becoming a paramedic was to be a flight paramedic or a critical care paramedic. I had achieved that, and so you get some pretty bad calls being in that type of a position. You're called out, those flight paramedics and nurses and the advanced paramedics, because they're bad calls.
Right.
And they need somebody with that higher training. And head injuries were really hard for me.
So when you saw somebody laying there in a similar state that you walked in on your son in the ER, did you flash back to that moment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one call in particular that was probably one of my last ones as a paramedic, because that's the one that was the hard trigger. It was probably it was about a month to the date after Christopher was killed in his car accident. I had a call for a 13-year-old that was in an accident, and she had a head injury. And I went into my professional paramedic mode and ran that call like I did any other call, giving her the best of me. When we unloaded her at the ER, she went to Trauma Bay 1.
Same place where Chris was at.
Same exact room. And she was on our stretcher, and I reached across the ambulance or the ER gurney, the bed, grabbed our backboard, and when I pulled her towards me across the bed in the ER, the smell of blood hit me, and that was the smell that it just like everything triggered. I literally felt like I was standing there next to Christopher, because that's the smell he had for those 3 days in the ICU, was that blood smell from all his trauma. And I held it together, grabbed my clipboard, gave my report, walked out to my ambulance, and literally fell to the ground behind my ambulance.
Wow.
And I said, I can't do this anymore.
So that was tail end of your career as a paramedic.
It was.
Well, something that I know very interesting about you is the career choice you made after you'd kind of arrived at this point. So let's talk about that a little bit. Thank you.
well, knowing that I wasn't going to be able to do this work anymore, and being a paramedic was my dream job. I had dreamed of it ever since. I told you in the beginning when we were talking that my mother died when I was a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
My mother also, ironically, died of a head injury in an accident. And I grew up wanting to be a paramedic. I grew up wanting to help people. A nurse, a paramedic, something in the medical profession. Well, paramedic is where I landed. So you have to understand, being a paramedic was my dream job. It's what I always wanted to be when I grew up. People have those dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And so walking away from that was not an easy decision for me. But I knew for my own well-being,
Right.
I had this was the time.
You couldn't continue to relive that pain over and over again.
And that what scared me more than anything is that I wouldn't be able to take care of my patients the way I should.
Right.
Because of that.
Mm-hmm. So
you say, yeah, where did your career take
where
you?
did it take you from there?
It took me into organ donation. I ironically was looking at the very company that did Christopher's donation. I was looking at their website. Lo and behold, they needed a coordinator right there at Scott and White for organ donation.
How ironic is that?
And, we talk about our faith, and we talk about, things that we experience. And Christopher, we had a very close connection after he passed away.
In what way?
He would talk to me. I could hear him. Like I would get ready to make a decision, and it's almost like, no, that's not what you should do. This is what you should do. So it's almost like I could hear him saying, Mom, that's probably not what you should do.
Oh, interesting.
Very interesting.
Could you feel his presence also?
I could. A lot. And so I just thought, I remember sitting there reading this, and I just kind of took a deep breath, and I thought, okay, Christopher, this is the direction. This is what we're supposed to do with this. Because remember, I told you from being in the ICU, now my shift was, where do we go from here? What do we do with this? How do we help other people out of this? How does another mother not have to go through? Or if they do go through this, how is it going to be a better experience?
So you had a renewed sense of purpose, I guess, at this point, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
And as a paramedic, I had transported those recovery teams on the ambulance back and forth. So I started asking all kinds of questions. I started digging into the website. I applied. It's like, this is what I'm supposed to do with this. This is my purpose, is to help carry Christopher's legacy forward and help other people. And I did.
Mm-hmm. So they hired you.
They did.
Wow. So here's a seasoned paramedic donor mother looking for that has experience in that hospital applying for a position.
And I had worked for Scott & White since '93. So in one form or fashion, I just changed positions. So I knew Scott & White. It was home to me.
So you were the perfect fit for the job.
Well, I certainly thought so.
Well, I guess they did too.
That's what I told him.
Wow. So I can only imagine with moving into that job, the number of people's lives that you were able to help change.
Yes, I was with that organization for about right at 11 years, and when I look at my paramedic profession, the years I spent as a paramedic, EMT, intermediate paramedic, and the years that I spent with the organization for organ donation, it's pretty similar in length of time. But I can without a doubt tell you that I felt more connected to people and more a part of saving people's lives in that career.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I know you've gone on to help a number of people, and you continue to do that. I know this about you. You have a huge heart. As we wrap up the program, a couple things I'd like you to address for anybody just going through this kind of tragedy or has recently been through this type of adversity in their life. What's one thing you think you could share with them to help them get through?
I think when you're faced with this kind of grief, especially the loss of a child, you have to find a purpose. You have to find something healthy to do with that, because grief will do one of two things to you. It will destroy you, or it will give you a direction and purpose. I think if you choose the direction and purpose, you can control those stages of grief. Not control how they're happening or what you're feeling, but how you choose to go through them.
Mm-hmm.
I consider myself a very, very strong woman. And I had to seek out professional counseling. I had to have somebody help me prepare for the days that it was going to be bad.
And I encourage anybody that's in need to do that.
Anybody.
Absolutely.
Don't think you're too strong. Because I did. I thought I was too strong. But I'll tell you what, Steve, when I told you that I went to a bad place after my son died, at one point I was sitting on my floor of my bathroom with a bottle of pills in my hand. Because I thought, if I can't have Chris, I'm going to go be with him.
So you just couldn't deal with the pain,
I
or you
couldn't
just
deal
wanted to
with
go
the
be
pain.
by his side?
The pain, the emptiness is so intense that you want to feel it, you want to make it go away, you want to make it better, but you can't. You can't. What I learned in seeking out professional help is you have to go through it. You can't go around it. You can't go over it. You can't ignore it. You have to go through it. And you have to prepare yourself for the hard days, for the firsts is what they call it. The first birthday, the first Christmas, that whole first year is I would find myself pulling over on the side of the road because I was crying so intensely I couldn't see. But I knew I had to prepare myself for that. And it's okay. That's going to happen. But you have to go through it.
Yet by going through it, you were able to successfully raise your daughter and successfully move on with your life and help countless other people.
Yes.
And you're still here a stronger woman.
Yes.
That's awesome. And thank you for sharing that story. And I think one other thing that we should touch on before we end this program that I think is very important, because I am also an organ donor. And if you could just leave our listeners with one thing kind of about the organ donation process, or the importance of considering organ donation.
I think the most important thing that I could say to people is to talk to the people in your family that you love, so they know that that's what you want. Because you say you're an organ donor. And remember I said that at that time you have so many emotions going on and so many feelings going on, and everybody has an opinion and everybody wants to help you make those decisions. Just make sure the people that are the closest to you know what you really want, and know that that's your legacy. That's your gift that you want to give.
So I know you've been on both sides of this organ donation process, both as a mother who was able to help other people with the passing of your son Chris, but through the organ donation experience that you've had working for the donor company. Why don't you share just a little bit about the recipients and what it means to them?
Oh my gosh. For years, while I was with, the donation organization, I was very highly involved with the recipients because it brought me so much closure to know that, the gifts that Christopher gave, there's life. I was able to meet Christopher's liver recipient, and when I wrapped my arms around that man and saw how healthy he was, and he was a dad with 2 kids,
Wow.
ironically a son the same age as Chris, now he's a grandfather, we stay in touch. That's your closure right there.
That's awesome.
That's life full circle. My son is living on in other people. That's his legacy.
Wow. Nanette, thank you so much for sharing. And I do want to encourage everyone to really get in touch and soul search with this organ donation process. Soul search with this story that Nanette shared with you, and going through this grief that, while it hurts, we know that with that sense of purpose we can pull through and find meaning in our life, and that sense of purpose can help pull us through and give us the focus and the healing that we so need. So Nanette, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with our guest today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, Mind Hostage fans. We hope you'll tune in the future, and you'll check us out at www.mindhostage.com. Check out our blog and our website, and check us out on Facebook at Mind Hostage. Also, don't forget to check out our friends at MyCBD 911 for the purest CBD on the planet. You guys have a rockin' day.